I wasn't asleep. I'd stopped sleeping 3 weeks ago. Truly sleeping. What I did now was something closer to surveillance. Body still, breathing measured, eyes closed, waiting. My wife lay beside me, her breathing rhythmic and shallow. Too rhythmic. The kind of practiced breathing you use when you want someone to think you're unconscious. For 7 years, I'd been an FBI financial crimes analyst and a forensic accountant for 15 years before that. My career was built on watching people pretend to be something they weren't. People lie, but numbers don't. And Megan was lying right now, even in her sleep, or whatever this was. The nightstand clock read 2 a.m. 30 minutes earlier, I'd watched her on my phone screen. The hidden camera in our garage fed directly to my cloud account. I'd watched her walk barefoot across the concrete in her silk robe, the one I'd bought her for our 7th anniversary. I'd watched the side door open, watched a man step inside like he owned the place. I'd watched him take her face in his hands and kiss her in a way that turned my stomach to concrete. I'd watched her smile. Really smile. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years, perhaps ever. Then I'd watched her hand him a vintage leather suitcase with a combination lock, the same style as the one I'd found 3 weeks ago, and I'd watched him slip her a thick envelope in return. They talked in whispers, heads bent together like teenagers sharing secrets. She'd laughed at something he said, and the sound, even through my phone's tiny speaker, was like a knife sliding between my ribs. Now she lay beside me, breathing her practiced breaths, probably replaying every moment, probably feeling his hands on her skin. I felt nothing. That's not true. I felt something cold and sharp taking shape in my chest. Something that had been growing since I found that first suitcase buried behind the paint cans. Not anger. Anger is hot and stupid. This was different. This was patience. This was calculation. This was the beginning of the end of everything she thought she knew about me. Megan stirred, rolling over, her hand reaching across the sheets to find my arm. Her fingers were cool. I didn't move. Some touches, I realized, are just performances. I was done being the audience. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been cleaning the garage. A Saturday morning ritual, my way of organizing my thoughts while organizing my space. Megan always joked I was the only man she knew who actually used the garage for something other than parking. She thought it was adorable. I thought it was necessary. A cluttered space meant a cluttered mind. And in my line of work, a cluttered mind got people imprisoned, or killed. I'd been moving boxes when I found it. A vintage leather suitcase wedged behind a stack of paint cans I hadn't touched in at least a year. Brown leather, brass hardware, combination lock. Dusty, but not aged. Someone had placed it there recently. I tried the obvious combinations. Our anniversary, 0714. Her birthday, 0318. Mine, 1105. Nothing. That evening, I mentioned it casually. We were making dinner. Or rather, I was making dinner while Megan sat on the counter with a glass of wine. Found something interesting in the garage today, I said, not looking up from the onions. Old suitcase behind the paint cans. You know anything about it? She didn't flinch. Didn't pause. Must be from the previous owners. We probably just never noticed it. Maybe, I said. Should we try to open it? See what's inside. What she should have said, asterisk yes, let's crack it open asterisk or, asterisk let's take it to a locksmith asterisk. What she actually said, don't bother. It's probably empty or full of moth-eaten clothes. Just toss it. She didn't ask what was inside. She didn't suggest opening it. She already knew. I smiled and changed the subject, filing the information away like I'd filed 1,000 inconsistencies over 22 years in law enforcement and private practice. An alarm was ringing somewhere deep in my brain, soft but insistent. We'd lived here 8 years. I'd cleaned that exact spot 12 months ago. That suitcase wasn't from the previous owners. But I didn't break the lock. I didn't confront her. The first rule of investigation is observation. You watch, you wait, you let the subject reveal themselves. So that's what I did. For the next 4 weeks, I checked that suitcase every few days. Always when Megan was out. I photographed it from multiple angles. I measured its position relative to the paint cans, the wall, the floor, down to the centimeter. It moved. Not much. Just slight shifts, as if someone had taken it out and put it back without quite matching my measurements. Someone was accessing it. Someone who thought they were being careful but wasn't careful enough. On day 28, the suitcase was gone. I came home to find the space behind the paint cans empty. Megan was already home, cooking dinner, humming. She didn't mention it. Neither did I. But I found something else. A single white pill on the concrete floor, right where the suitcase had been. Small, round, with a pharmaceutical imprint I didn't recognize. Not my medication. Not hers, as far as I knew. I pocketed it. 3 days later, I installed the camera. The smoke detector in our garage took me 45 minutes and a trip to a specialty electronics shop to replace with something identical looking but containing a motion-activated camera with cloud upload. The kind of equipment paranoid spouses and corporate investigators use. I'd never thought I'd be one of those people. Then again, I'd never thought my wife would be sneaking around our garage in the middle of the night. I told no one. Not my business partner, not my best friend David. At this point, I didn't have evidence. I had suspicion, and suspicion was worth exactly nothing in court, whether legal or personal. 2 weeks later, at 12:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I was lying in bed beside Megan, or the woman I'd thought was Megan, listening to her practice her sleeping breaths. I unlocked my phone under the covers and watched my marriage end in high definition. The man was tall, dark-haired, handsome in a weathered way. He moved through our garage like he'd done it 100 times before, which he probably had. When Megan came through the interior door, he didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her like a man greeting his wife after a long absence. Not the kiss of an affair. The kiss of a relationship. Of history. She handed him a different suitcase, same vintage style, dark green instead of brown. He handed her an envelope thick enough that I could see its bulk even through the grainy night vision. They talked for several minutes, heads bent together, and twice she laughed. That real laugh, the one I'd almost forgotten existed. When he left, she tucked the envelope into her robe pocket and walked to the far corner of the garage. There was a loose baseboard there. She pried it back, slipped the envelope behind it, and replaced the board with practiced ease. Then she came back inside, climbed into bed, and was asleep within minutes. I lay there for 3 more hours watching the ceiling, running numbers in my head. Not financial numbers. Probability numbers. The probability of an innocent explanation for what I'd just seen, essentially 0. The probability that confronting her would give me any advantage, also 0. The probability that I could systematically dismantle whatever operation she was running and destroy her in the process, that number I intended to make very high. The next morning, I made coffee. She came downstairs in yoga pants and a Georgetown sweatshirt, my sweatshirt, and kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. Sleep okay? She asked. Not great. Kept waking up. Me too. Must be something in the air. I watched her pour her coffee, add oat milk, take that first sip with her eyes closed. I'd watched her do this 1,000 times. I'd loved watching her. Now I saw it for what it was. Theater. A performance designed to make me think I knew her when I'd never known her at all. You seem stressed, she said, studying me over the rim of her mug. Work stuff. Always work stuff. Maybe you should take a break. We could go to the beach or up to wine country. Maybe, I said. Let me see how the next few weeks shake out. She nodded, satisfied, and drifted toward the living room. I watched her go, cataloguing details, the way she angled her phone screen away from me when she texted, the extra few thousand always in her personal account despite her healthy but not extravagant pharmaceutical salary, the people she mentioned that I'd never met. How long had I been blind? Or had I simply not wanted to see? It didn't matter now. I had work to do. The envelope contained $12,000 in cash and a handwritten note on plain white paper. I found it that afternoon while Megan was at a yoga class I now suspected wasn't a yoga class. Asterisk next run Thursday. Amber has the route. Same split. Miss you. K. Asterisk. The handwriting was bold, masculine. But the initial caught my attention. Asterisk K star. Not Connor or Chris. Asterisk K asterisk was someone else. Or it was her. Megan's maiden name was Kelsey. Megan and Kelsey. But what if that wasn't true? I photographed everything. I replaced it all exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat in my car in the garage for 20 minutes, thinking. Asterisk Amber has the route. Asterisk Amber, Megan's best friend, the flight attendant based out of Atlanta. Perfect cover for transporting things across state lines. I needed professional help. Luckily, I knew just the person. Nathan Price looked like a film noir detective dropped into the 21st century. Grey hair cropped short, a face that had seen too many late nights, and eyes that missed nothing. He'd been a homicide detective for 2 decades before taking a bullet and going private. 5 years ago, I'd cleared his name when a client tried to frame him for money laundering. He'd told me he owed me one. We met at a diner 30 miles outside the city. I'd driven in circles to make sure I wasn't followed. Paranoid, but paranoia keeps people alive. Nathan was already in a back booth with black coffee. He looked up as I approached. Trevor. You look like a man with a problem. Saturday. I need you to investigate my wife. What kind of investigation? I slid my phone across the table with the saved footage. He watched, face neutral, then handed it back. How long? I don't know. The suitcase was 3 weeks ago, but this has been going on a while. Years, maybe. What do you want to find out? Everything. Who the man is. Who Amber is. What they're running. And who my wife actually is. Nathan raised an eyebrow. You think she's not who she says she is? I told him about the note, the asterisk K star. He nodded slowly. The suitcase thing, that's not amateur hour. You might be married to a professional. That's what I'm afraid of. And you want the truth, even if it's ugly. Especially if it's ugly. Most men in your situation would want to confront her, yell, get answers. Most men haven't spent 20 years watching people lie. Confrontation gives her control. Information gives me control. I met his eyes. I don't want to yell, Nathan. I want to bury her. A small smile crossed his face. Not amusement. Recognition. All right, he said. Let's get to work. Nathan's first report came a week later. Same diner, same booth. Your guy's name is Connor Webb, he said, sliding a folder across. 41. Owns Meridian Antiquities. High-end art and antique dealer. On paper, legitimate. In reality, offense. Move stolen goods across state lines. I opened the folder. Connor Webb stared up from a surveillance photo, wearing the same Cartier tank watch I'd noticed in the footage. Married? I asked. That's where it gets interesting. Nathan leaned back. Connor Webb got married in 2009, Nevada. Small ceremony. His wife, Kelsey Ann Dawson. The name hit me like a physical blow. Kelsey Ann Dawson. And Megan's maiden name on our certificate is Megan and Kelsey. Nathan nodded. Same letters, different order. She flipped her first and last name, kept an in the middle. And there's no divorce record. No annulment. As far as Nevada is concerned, Kelsey and Dawson is still married to Connor Webb. The diner noise seemed to fade. Which means my marriage might be void. Bigamy is still a crime in all 50 states. She can't legally be married to 2 people at once. I closed the folder. What else? Her juvenile record was sealed, but I have contacts. Kelsey and Dawson, born 1987. First arrest at 15 for shoplifting. Second at 17 for check fraud. Charges reduced, record sealed at 18. She and Connor met when she was 19, married at 21. For 6 years, they ran cons together. Identity theft, credit card fraud. In 2012, Connor got too close to federal heat. Kelsey disappeared. Vanished. New identity, new life. By the time she met you, Megan and Kelsey was a real person with real credit and a real job. And I was what? Cover? Or an opportunity? A forensic accountant with a clean record, respectable reputation. You were the perfect shield. Nathan hesitated. Actually, that's exactly what she called you. I'll get to that. The picture filled in over the next several weeks. Nathan was thorough. The pharmaceutical angle was brilliant. Megan's job gave her access to shipping schedules and security protocols. Connor's business was the fence. Amber was the courier, a flight attendant who could move product across the country with a smile and a rolling bag. It was elegant, sophisticated, worth millions. And it was all built on my wife's lies. There's one more thing, Nathan said during our third meeting, his voice hesitant. I managed to get Amber alone. She talked. She's scared. She's willing to give records, dates, amounts, in exchange for nothing yet. She also told me how Megan talks about you. He met my eyes. She laughed about you. Said you were so boring, so predictable, but your credit was perfect and you never asked questions. She called you the perfect cover. I absorbed this, filed it away. Did she say anything else? Yeah. Nathan's jaw tightened. She said Kelsey was planning to leave. Once this year's runs hit their numbers, she was taking the money and going. You'd wake up one morning and she'd be gone. Just like she disappeared from Connor in 2012, except with your money too. I thought about that. About her lying beside me every night, counting down the days. Set up a meeting with Amber, I said. I want to hear it from her directly. Amber Lair was pretty in a nervous, high-strung way. We met at a coffee shop in Buckhead. I didn't know it was going to be like this, she said before I'd even sat down. I thought it was just a side thing. Making extra money. I didn't know it was federal. What exactly have you been moving? Pharmaceuticals. High-demand stuff. Kelsey knows when shipments are vulnerable. Connor has buyers. I just carried the suitcases. How long? For years. Since 2020. She looked miserable. Low risk, right? I showed her a photo of Kelsey and Connor. And them? How long? As long as I've known her. They never really stopped. Even when she was with you. Hotels, his place when you were traveling. She said you worked a lot, so it was easy. She said a lot of things. Amber looked at me with something like pity. She used to joke about you. Not mean, just dismissive. Like you were furniture. The boring husband. Yeah. I'm sorry. I want to hear the truth. That's all. She studied me. You're not like she said. She made you sound soft, naive. But you're not, are you? No, I said quietly. I'm not. So what are you going to do? I smiled. It wasn't friendly. I'm going to make her wish she'd never heard my name. David Foster's office occupied the entire 47th floor of a downtown high-rise. He was the same as in college, sharp, loyal, and possessed of a moral flexibility that made him an exceptional divorce attorney. He was the only person I'd told. Let me see if I understand, he said, leaning back. Your wife is actually Kelsey Dawson. She was already married when she married you, making your marriage void. She's been having an affair with her first husband for at least 4 years, and they've been running an interstate pharmaceutical theft ring. That's the summary. I handed him the folder, 3 inches thick. Nathan's reports, Amber's testimony, surveillance, financial records. Kelsey's secret account held $287,000. All unreported. David paged through, his expression shifting to awe. This is prosecutable multiple times over. So what do you want? An annulment, not a divorce. The marriage was fraudulent. Void *AB initio star. I keep all assets. Report her to the IRS for tax evasion. An anonymous tip to her company's security. And a package to the FBI with everything on the theft ring. Connor as ringleader, Kelsey as inside source, Amber as courier. David studied me. You want to destroy her completely. I want justice. Everything I'm doing is legal. Everything I'm reporting is true. She committed the crimes. I'm just making sure authorities know. That's a very precise distinction. I'm a precise person. David smiled, something sharper and more knowing. In all the years I've known you, I've never seen this side of you. This is something else. This is what she made me. No, David shook his head. This is what was always there. She just gave you a reason to let it out. Maybe he was right. Maybe she'd woken something in me that had been sleeping for years. Something cold, calculated, and without mercy. If so, that was her mistake. The next 2 weeks were preparation. I moved my belongings to storage, a few items at a time. Opened new accounts. Changed beneficiaries. Documented everything. And I watched Kelsey perform her role, never suspecting the curtain was about to fall. You've seemed distracted lately, she said one evening, her feet in my lap. Everything okay? Just work stress. Big case. Anything you want to talk about? I looked at her, saw the mask clearly now. The concern, the touch, all theater. No, I said. Nothing important. She smiled and went back to her phone, probably texting Connor. I went back to planning her destruction. Day 91 was a Tuesday. I woke at 4:30 a.m. and lay in the dark, running through the timeline. Everything was in place. When her alarm went off at 6:30, I was already downstairs making her favorite breakfast, eggs Benedict with smoked salmon and hollandaise from scratch. What's the occasion? She asked, accepting the plate. No reason. Just felt like it. She studied me, looking for the trap, but found nothing. I'd spent 22 years learning to keep my face neutral. This was the final exam. Thank you, she said finally. This is sweet. You're welcome. We ate. She left for work at 8:15, kissing my cheek. See you tonight. I'll be here, I said. I watched her card disappear. Then I pulled out my phone and made the calls. The first domino fell at 10 a.m. exactly. A process server walked into her office. Kelsey and Dawson? You've been served. Inside, a petition for annulment based on fraud and bigamy, with copies of her Nevada marriage certificate and Connor's photo. At 10:15, her corporate email locked. Security escorted her to HR. An internal investigation had been initiated based on anonymous information regarding theft. Administrative suspension. At 10:45, her credit card declined at Starbucks. All cards I was primary on had been cancelled. At 11:30, her secret savings account, frozen by the IRS. Nathan sent updates. Asterisk left building. Looks panicked. Driving home. Ran a red light. At your house. Door won't open. Asterisk. I'd had the locks changed at 9 a.m. Kelsey, I wouldn't call her Megan anymore, stood on the porch trying key after key. None worked. She went around back. The sliding door was unlocked. I'd left it that way on purpose. The house was half empty. My things were gone. The photos of us were gone. On the kitchen counter was a single envelope. Inside, surveillance photos, transaction records, her Nevada marriage certificate, and a handwritten note from me. The first words I'd said to her that weren't a lie in what felt like forever, *, the locks have been changed. Your attorney can reach mine. Don't contact me. *. She tried. 17 missed calls, 32 texts over 6 hours. I didn't read them. I didn't listen. At 2 p.m., her phone rang. Connor. Federal agents had raided his warehouse, seizing stolen pharmaceuticals and documentation. He was panicking. But Kelsey couldn't help him. The next 3 days were a slow-motion implosion. She showed up at my office, crying, claiming I was abusive, that my actions were retaliation. I watched through the glass as security escorted her out. David filed a formal response with recordings from our home security showing a normal, peaceful household. Her desperation was making her sloppy. On day 6, the FBI interviewed her. She walked in charming, cooperative. They had Amber's testimony, my documentation, evidence from Connor's warehouse, months of garage footage. By the end, her lawyer was advising cooperation. Then they told her about Connor. Arrested in Miami trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with $200,000 in cash and a forged passport. 2 tickets. First class to San Jose. The second ticket wasn't for Kelsey. It was for Amber. Kelsey walked out of that interview looking like someone had torn out her spine. Not because of the charges. Because after everything, Connor had been planning to leave her behind, too. She was disposable. She'd never even known it. The annulment was granted 3 weeks later. The marriage was declared void from the beginning. Legally, it had never existed. I kept the house, the assets, everything. Kelsey had no claim. The criminal charges took longer. Bigamy, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit interstate theft. Her company filed a civil suit. The IRS wanted their share. She was looking at 5 to 8 years federal. Connor got 12. He'd been planning his exit for months, skimming, preparing to disappear just as she had from him in 2012. Poetic justice. Amber got 18 months and supervised release. Cooperating witness, first-time offender. Against David's advice, I agreed to meet Kelsey one last time before sentencing. A coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. She looked smaller, thinner, hollowed out. She wore clothes I didn't recognize. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice flat. "What do you want?" I wanted to explain. "No." She looked up, startled. "You had 9 years to explain. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose to plan your escape while you slept in my bed and spent my money and laughed about me with your boyfriend." I kept my voice even. "So no, I don't want your explanations." "Then why did you come?" "Because I wanted to ask you something." I leaned forward. Was any of it real? Any of it at all? She was quiet for a long moment. "At the beginning, when we first met. I thought maybe I could be that person. The person you thought I was." She swallowed. "But I couldn't. I'd been the other person too long." "That's not an answer." "I know." She met my eyes. "I don't have a good answer. I don't have an excuse. I just did what I knew how to do. And when it got easy to keep lying, I kept lying." I studied her face. The face I'd woken up next to for 9 years. I felt nothing. Not anger, not grief. Just a vast, cold emptiness where my marriage used to be. "You called me boring," I said. "You called me predictable." She flinched. You were half right. I stood, left money for my untouched coffee. Goodbye, Kelsey. I walked out without looking back. 1 year later, I was cleaning the garage. Saturday morning ritual. Some things don't change. I'd sold the house to a young couple expecting their first child. They were happy, unaware of what had happened there. Some truths don't need to be shared. I found the hidden camera still in its smoke detector housing. I climbed the ladder, unscrewed it, and dropped it in the trash. Evidence collected. Purpose served. The loose baseboard had been replaced during a renovation. The new board was flush, secure. Nothing could hide behind it anymore. I carried the last box to my car, took one final look, and closed the door. 6 months later, a news article appeared. Asterisk pharmaceutical theft ringleader sentenced. Asterisk a photo of Connor in handcuffs. A paragraph about Kelsey and Dawson receiving a 6-year sentence. For $0.2 million in damages recovered. I read it twice, then closed the browser. Later that week, a letter arrived at my office. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. The same bold script from the note behind the baseboard. I held it, feeling its weight. Then I walked to the shredder, fed it through, and watched it turn to confetti. Some letters should never be opened. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and got to work. A new case, possible embezzlement at a medical device company. Complex enough to occupy me for months. Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life. I'd survived. More than survived. I'd won. But I'd also learned something about myself. The cold precision that had served me during Kelsey's destruction hadn't disappeared. It was still there, coiled deep inside, waiting for the next time someone mistook my patience for weakness. The boring husband. The predictable husband. The perfect cover. They never saw me coming. Maybe that was the point. I finished my coffee and let the numbers take me away. Numbers don't lie. People do. But I'd gotten pretty good at spotting the difference. The garage was empty now, sold to strangers. The suitcases were gone. The cameras were gone. The woman I'd thought was my wife was gone. All that remained was me and the cold, patient thing inside me that never quite went back to sleep. Some stories end with healing. Some with understanding. Some with lessons learned. Mine ended with a shredder and a cup of coffee and a new case file on my desk. That was enough. That was exactly enough.